Hi, I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Hello, my name is Evelyn Richardson, and thank you for joining For the Greater Good. Today I have a special guest. Her name is Sister Michelle Muhammad, and I would like to introduce you to her and for her to share some of the information that she has stored up within her spirit about community activism, community engagement, and us all working together for the greater good of the community. Thank you for joining us, Sister Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, so this is going to be a very light-hearted conversation. I know when I initially asked you to be on the show, you were like, for what? And I will be honest with all you viewers, although I've had the pleasure of encountering Sister Michelle at some events out in the community, that initially my first contact with you was through Facebook.
Yes.
We have quite a few people in common in the community arena and in the political arena.
Absolutely.
And I read some of your stats sometime, and I was like, wow, this is a very interesting woman. And then you turned around one day and did something that out of the maybe 20 or so years that I've been of age to be invited to fellowship with Muslims, it has never happened outside of men offering me the opportunity. And you were the first woman that offered me the opportunity. So I was like, I like this woman. Because, it's a difference, being invited somewhere you've never been,
True.
By your peers, and in this case I'm saying somebody of the same sex. It meant a lot to me. So you've earned a place in my heart for that gesture.
You have a place in my heart as well.
So just share with us some background information. Who is Sister Michelle Muhammad?
Oh, wow. I haven't been asked that question, I don't think, ever.
But we think about it all the time.
Yes. Who is Sister Michelle? Well, I'm not originally from Hartford. I was actually born in New York, and I moved to Hartford with my family. And once I came into Hartford, I wanted to become active in the community. I found a religious home, and within that religious home, it's very important for us to become involved in the community to help, the best that we can. I am married, and I am a mother of 4. I have 2 stepchildren, 5 grandchildren. I work full time, and also, try to be as active as possible in the community. And the biggest thing that I've learned in, my faith walk is to learn to focus on what we have in common. And when we do that, then I think we can be a lot more helpful with some of the issues that are going on in the community. We seem to move through the community looking sideways at each other, and that doesn't really help, our target audience, if you will. So I've been blessed to be guided to open up my mind and my heart, and we all have our prejudices, if you will, about people that we are not familiar with. And the best way to work through that is to learn, to be open to learn. If you're secure in what it is that you're doing in your walk, then there's no harm in taking in new information.
Exactly.
And you filter it. If it works for you, then you take in additional information, and if it doesn't, then you know what to do as well. So that I just try to treat my brother and my sister the way that I would like to be treated. Well, that's basically
how much easier it would be for us all.
Yes.
So can you share with us, you mentioned earlier that although you're not living in the immediate Hartford community, you're right on the outskirts in Bloomfield, but that your husband and you own a practice in the Hartford neighborhood. So share a little bit about that.
Yes. My husband and I, but he does most of the work, obviously, owns a dental practice here in Hartford. He's been in Hartford for over 20 years. He worked at a community health center, and then after a period of time, he went into private practice. And we're right now located at 30 Atwood Street in Hartford, Connecticut, which is right behind St. Francis Hospital. So being that he's been in the community for a little while now, we have, patients that he's serviced that were on third generation with some of them.
Exactly.
He was their,
years,
he was their dentist when they were small children, and then, when they became, and now he's working on their children and sometimes their grandchildren. So he's been in the community for a while.
And I need a dentist, so I might be visiting you guys.
Oh, please come on by.
Okay, so you shared a little some of about your affiliation, and I talked about being invited. The first time that I've ever attended a mosque was, with your invitation.
Yes.
Can you just kind of share a little bit with us about your faith, and although you did prior, how it relates to your community work?
Okay. Well, I go to Muhammad's Mosque number 14, which is the local mosque for the Nation of Islam. And when I first came to the area, which was in the early 90s, and then joined the mosque, and their focus is very much on being helpful in the community with whatever issues that are going on. And of course, I wanted to do my part. You just try to find your niche and, what it is that you're comfortable with. I have a lot of issues, a lot of concerns in different areas as far as, good education for our children. And I could say our children.
That's right.
Because, we understand maybe not so much in our activity now. I think we've grown away from it, but hopefully we're on a path going back towards the concept of it takes a village to raise a child.
Exactly.
The way that I grew up, the whole neighborhood was involved in my upbringing. I lived down the street from my grandparents when I was a young child, and each house in between, there was someone in the house who was responsible for the child. If they saw me doing something,
Right.
They would, of course, let my grandmother know or my parents, but they also would give their input as far as correction.
Exactly.
So,
long gone are those days.
Exactly.
There's some of us that still are trying.
Yes, there are some that still live by that philosophy.
So share with me, because I remember when I visited with you at the mosque, you had shared with me before my parting, although you understand that, I follow Jesus.
Yes.
Although, let me correct that, because I learned by coming to your mosque that for years, for some reason, I didn't have the knowledge that you all believed in Jesus at all.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that can show how ignorant we can be to some aspects of other people's faith.
Right.
So and to think that you actually follow his teaching.
Yes.
And up to a certain point,
absolutely.
certain parts.
Absolutely.
So although I know that most people believe that Jesus lived,
Yes.
You just don't believe that he's God's son and that he's the savior of the world. And we don't have to elaborate,
right? We don't have
this
to, right. Well,
unless I said something that wasn't correct.
As a Muslim, okay, we absolutely believe in Jesus, and there are parts of the Quran that take us back to Jesus and his mother Mary as examples of how to live righteously. So I understand absolutely where you're coming from, because as a young child and up until adulthood, I was raised as Baptist. My mother's father was a Baptist minister, and then of course as family that's what we followed. Didn't know at that time much about Islam, certainly, but like I said, once you open yourself up and you start learning, my thing was, okay, well, if they believe in Jesus too, this is from my vantage point as a Christian, from my understanding. If they believe in Jesus and then you believe in Jesus, then why are we fighting? Why are we not connecting? And I believe the biggest reason we're not connecting is because we walk in fear. So we don't learn, what it is. Well, what is it exactly that you believe in? Okay, and then go from there. So we're kind of walking for, this is not something that I follow, and because I have my fears of ending up on the wrong path, I shut down learning. So I go off of misinformation. Okay, I was excited actually once I started looking more into the Muslim faith to understand that, all of the prophets are the same. They're the same for people who are of the Jewish faith. They're the same for people who, are Christian, and certainly as Muslim, So our similarities are much more than our differences, but somehow we focus on those, and I think that's where the division comes forth. I think as people of God, all of us, we should understand that, because why was the division focused on? And we understand what that spirit is.
Exactly.
So, yes.
Of course. Thank you. So, the comment that you had made to me, understanding that that my ties are more associated with maybe a non-denominational belief today, but although I was raised as a Baptist also. So you shared that, we have to break past those religious barriers, and that, we have to become united.
Right.
And, we both stood there, and as we talked, was like, Evelyn, we know we have some strong men, and I'm kind of like paraphrasing it, but we women might just really have to, get this thing done. So
Absolutely.
Share with me something about that. How do you believe that maybe the woman has this ability to be the change agents for what we're striving to do for our communities and our children?
Well, in the Nation of Islam, we're taught that the woman is the second self of Allah or God, okay? And we're also taught that certainly the black woman is the mother of civilization. So, there's a great responsibility that comes with that. I see sometimes in, different religious houses, and also just in different walks of thought, where sometimes the woman is relegated to an inferior position, or the things that make her powerful, such as being a mother, or being the caretaker of the home, has been made to look as though it's something inferior. But that's not true. There's great power in that. As a mother, you're usually your child's first, how would we put it, maybe religious guide. You're the one that demonstrates for your child that connection to God in whatever way that you follow that. But you're also your child's first nurse, your child's first doctor, counselor. And even there's power in cooking, which we've gotten away from as women.
Course.
And we've been made to look at it. And I can speak on this because that was myself. My mom cooked every day. And then I grew up into this modern day society, and then all of a sudden it became let's go to a restaurant, let's microwave it, and I've come to learn that that's not necessarily the best way, but that I can heal my family, or devastate my family, as far as health, in how I handle that kitchen, So I think it's just a matter of relearning about our power, and in doing that, we also create an environment. As we know, our men are under a great strain. The focus is on our men being negative more often than not, and then when they come home and there's this disconnect, where do they get the relief to be able to go out into the world to do the things that we, oftentimes talk about that they don't do. They don't, they're not good fathers or not good husbands, or they're not committed, or those types of things. But if we're the ones attacking them when they come where they should find rest and comfort, then, there's an issue. So I think it's just relearning who we are, relearning the power of, what we have, and not looking at it from this world standard, because who's running the world now, unfortunately, and the reason the world is being run, unfortunately, by that alternate spirit is because the people of God, under whatever label you are, have not stood up to champion the power of what we have, so I think that we have a great power that we just have to rethink, the way we approach it, and not necessarily approach it from a negative, standpoint, or accept something to be inferior that really is not.
I agree. Thank you for explaining that to me, because I agreed when you made the casual comment, but to hear the story that's behind it, yes.
It's not meant as, the comment wasn't meant as an affront against our men. It was meant as, we have to step in and play our role to help, to lift them up, so.
Great. Okay. So, I try to remember things. Sometimes I'm not so good at it, so correct me if I recall it wrong. But
Okay.
I believe that at some point we might have talked about education, the
Yes.
children's education, and you mentioned that you homeschooled or you were home.
I
or
was interested in,
you were
homeschooling.
interested in
Yes,
homeschooling.
in homeschooling.
Okay.
I've been working and the challenges that my daughters now have with educating their children, and also of course hindsight is 2020. There's some challenges that came up dealing with my children that if I had understood differently, that I would have liked to have handled in a what I feel would be a better or more beneficial way. Just looking at the challenges of education, the high dropout rate, the high now becoming arrest rate for our young children in the school system, and
School
the
to prison pipeline.
right the way of handling our children who have challenges, okay, is to criminalize them, and that starts with oh, you have a behavioral issue, let's expel you, or our children are children of movement. So to sit them down and say
For 6 hours.
exactly, don't move, but just recite what I've given you. It's unfair, and I think that we, as educators and as the parents, who the educators actually work for, that they have a responsibility to respond better to the different learning style that our children have, and rather than digging your heels in to say, well, this is the way it has to be, as opposed to walking to meet where that child is at. Because every child has great potential, even a child that comes from a home that has challenges. So everyone has their role, but it seems as though everyone is trying to shift the responsibility onto the next person. Some parents don't want to do what they're supposed to do, so they expect the teachers to work miracles when they get to school. But by the same token, some of the teachers, rather than meeting the different child where they're at, they say, well, it's the parents' responsibility. I'm not necessarily in agreement with that, because that's why you're being paid. You're being paid to put out an exceptional product.
All right, now.
Exactly.
All right. Okay, so I was speaking with someone before, and she's one of the leaders of a resident leadership training academy.
Okay.
And I'm always interested when, because I like learning about some of the faith patterns of other religions, and she was a Jehovah Witness.
Okay.
And I was talking to her about politics, and she said, well, we don't vote. Is that the case with Muslims?
Well, we've been taught what is to learn to analyze what is in our best interest. And certainly our faith is in the one God, Allah, and what he does. So, at the end, it's that individual's determination as to whether or not they're going to engage in that. Certainly, there are some Muslims who, engage and also become active and, as a politician. Personally, for me, I'm kind of trying to evaluate that as certainly. I voted for our president.
Okay.
And,
came out for that one,
yes,
huh? So that means that you haven't voted for anything else? I'm getting nosy now.
No. You're putting me on Front Street. No, it's not that. It's that sometimes I feel that people who want to go into that arena go in with the greatest of intentions. However, they're going into a system that's unfortunately most of the times corrupted. So you go in with the greatest of intentions, but because it's a structure that's already there before you get there, it's to a degree a limit on how much of a change you could actually make. So
and that's why we should be voting to create positive change.
I do believe that if each individual stood up and was responsible for what it is that they're supposed to do, that changes could be made. Unfortunately, a lot of times you're the one person or the one or two that are trying to go up against a greater system that does not want to make those changes, unfortunately. So I don't think we should be naive. So I'm a little torn. I do believe that if enough people stand up, that certainly changes could be made in that arena. Unfortunately, a lot of times I don't think there's enough people who are willing to go against the grain, if you will, to make those things happen. you know.
So if somebody decided to create a political action committee and said, you know what, Sister Michelle, we need you because we know that you have integrity, you know, you're working for this greater good, and we want to put you together with a few other people that will not sell out the community, that will do what's right, and will go down burning with the tower for justice and equity. Would you be willing to be one of those people?
I would be open. I can't, say I would absolutely, because I'm at a place now where I know that I really need to thoroughly investigate what's going on, see the players involved, what their true agenda is, because sometimes people present, themselves as being for an agenda, and there's really something behind that. So I believe that there's the ability to, go that way. I don't know if I necessarily have faith
in the system.
Man. I have faith in God, right?
Man,
but I don't know if I
another
have
beast.
faith that man will do what he should do, by our Creator, to do what needs to be done. But I'm always open to at least investigate.
Okay. So here is an item that I'm very interested in. I found out a few years back, I was like, because my mother, God bless my mother's soul, she taught me what I knew as a child about believing in Christ. Okay. And I built my relationship on that through her, and over the years, although she was, she did a lot of things, but she did always take the time to give me some of her wisdom, and I was grateful for that. And then when I got older, maybe about 25 or so, she met someone in prison, and he was a Muslim. Okay. So she turned all the way around on me. And I was like, what? You spent 20-something years telling me this. Right. Because when you go into a faith, you kind of want to bring your family with you, if you strongly believe in this thing. So, she was trying to work on me and stuff. And for a minute, she kind of had me. And she was like, I have this gentleman I want you to meet. And she rapped. I tell you, she had the what you call it, the hygiene. She had me the long dress, and the only thing that
was over your eyes, right?
Because I was like, I wanted to, to believe along with my mother and stuff. And I remember she sent me to meet this gentleman and stuff. And I hadn't seen him after I initially, went to meet him. I hadn't seen him for years because I was too busy trying to hang out and stuff at that time. But I tell you this because it's so funny when I think of it. Yeah. Like 20 years later, he ended up back in Hartford, and I was going into a Family Dollar store, and he said, "Nene?" And I turned around and stuff. I didn't know who he was because he had a bunch of hair. The first time I met, he said, "I know those eyes." I was like, I was like, really? So you can actually have on blankets, and they still can
absolutely identify you, right?
It's like, I know those eyes. I'll never forget those eyes. So, but that was something. So after all of those years, then she changed into a Muslim, and she's tried to to teach me and instill some of that in me, which she did. Right. And I found that very interesting that someone can be so strongly here, and then go over here. But I remember her being able to tie it in where it wasn't an offense. And I hear you saying that in your in some of your communications that we have more in common than we have, in difference. But during that time, I was reading a lot of the literature that she used to bring home and stuff. And one of the things that I found interesting, and still do to this day, and since I have you here, I'm going to put you in the hot seat just for 1 second. It probably isn't a hot seat for you. I found it interesting that a part of the mission was that the faith wanted to secure its own state for black people. And that was something that was adopted years ago, but I don't hear about it anymore in the conversations in amongst Muslim people. Is it something that needs to be edited, revised, or is it still an agenda
Well,
at some point?
it's interesting because, for all like with Christianity, there's different denominations, if you will, and they call it within Islam they call it different sects, SECTS, and certainly the main book is the Holy Quran, but just with different denominations in Christianity, different denominations have slightly different beliefs than others. But what I found is that, like I said, I grew up Baptist. I did study with the Jehovah's Witnesses for a period of time. And, there is only one God. I think that people of religion forget that. It's all of a sudden we seem to think that, there's a Jewish God, then there's, the God for the Jehovah's Witnesses, and then the Muslim God, and it's,
do you really think people think like that?
I've run into people who thought like that, who thought it that. But what I came to understand, there's only one Creator,
right.
And He's certainly, unfortunately, not as narrow-minded as we are, because the human family came from Him, certainly. So if we're different hues, as we're taught in the Quran, of different hues, then certainly He might understand that He needs to guide some of us differently, because your walk has been a little bit differently than mine. So it's not a stretch. What I found is marrying them to each other, because I just find that they're a continuation of each other, of the same walk, and that's what got me when I started studying Islam, and I started looking into within what we were being taught. I also went back and was looking at the the Torah, which is the Old Testament. And then when Jesus came to give us the good news, I said us, the good news,
right.
Then that became the New Testament. That's the Bible. Well, the Holy Quran just goes back and says, because we know, that Satan is a true force in what we're doing. So his job is to throw us off, As a matter of fact, that's one of the challenges he made to Allah God in the Quran, is that I'm going to come after them in your straight path. Well, what would the straight path of God be but His religion? You know what I'm saying? So that's how we all ended up thinking that there's 3 different religions, not to mention the other ones that aren't regularly recognized. So there isn't a disconnect for her to connect that, because the Holy Quran just goes back and says, well, what I originally said, to Moses, to Lot, to Noah, they sound familiar? Those are the same prophets that are in the Bible, right? So where did we end up fighting each other? Something is going on there. And I think that a lot of times we don't really understand that Satan is powerful and he's working. And the best way to work with anyone is to divide and conquer. And he's unfortunately doing too good of a job right now.
Right here is where we'll take a break. Thank you for joining For the Greater Good with Evelyn Richardson, your host. We'll be right back with our special guest, Sister Michelle Muhammad. Thank you.
At Hartford Public Schools, we care about one thing above all, the future of our kids. That's why we're dedicated to providing all students with the knowledge and skills needed in the new global culture. Hartford Public Schools is thriving. More student success stories, more world-class facilities, more university and corporate partnerships, more amazing talent coming and staying in Hartford. This is how education is supposed to work. Welcome to Hartford Public Schools, where the future is present.
Welcome back to For the Greater Good with Evelyn Richardson and our special guest, Michelle Muhammad, Sister Michelle Muhammad. I want to thank you very much for joining us on this show. We've run out of time, actually. That's how it gets when the conversation is really good and you're talking to somebody that you respect and love, and it just feels like a family-orientated atmosphere over here. So thank you so much, and I look forward to having you back sometime.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. Have a blessed day.